Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture I'm going to show you how to create an elastic load balancer and how to configure health checks for it. So the first thing you're going to need to do is log into your SSH terminal and log into the EC2 instance that we have created. Okay, so I've logged into my EC2 instance and I'm just going to elevate my privileges, so sudo su. Then I'm going to go over to my var www html directory. And you may still have the index.html file that we created in one of the previous labs. If so, just keep it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file. We're going to call it health checks. I'm going to type in nano. And again, if you just remember, nano is a text file editor. I'm going to call it healthcheck.html. And I'm just going to put in here, hello, Cloud Gurus. This instance is healthy. Okay, and I'm going to save that and hit yes and then hit enter. Okay, and if we just type in ls again, you'll be able to see healthcheck.html exists. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the AWS console. Okay, so I'm in the AWS console and I'm going to go over here to EC2. And you'll see I've still got one running instance. I've still got a couple of volumes left from some of the last labs. And then if I go over here to load balancing, you'll see load balancer has its own section. So I'll click on load balancer. And right now I do not have any load balancers in this region. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and create a load balancer. And I'm going to call my load balancer my web DMZ. And I'm going to create it inside my default VPC, and we'll create our own VPCs later on in this course. Now, it gives me the option to create an internal load balancer. Whether it's an internal or external just depends on whether or not it's going to be internet facing. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. I want this load balancer to be internet facing. And here I can enable advanced VPC configuration. That's beyond the scope of this course at this time. Okay, and so down here I have my listener configuration, and basically this is my load balancer protocol and what port it's listening on. So HTTP is listening on port 80, and then here I've got my instance protocol and what port to direct that traffic to. So you can do an advanced feature called port address translation. This is not something that's relevant to the Solutions Architect exam. This is more of a SysOps question, but you could say I want to send all port 80 traffic to port 8080, for example. So you could put in alternative ports. We're just going to leave that blank and do port 80 to port 80. Next, we're going to go ahead and assign our security groups. So I'm going to use the WebDMZ security group that I created earlier. Notice that you can assign your load balancer to multiple security groups at once. I'm just going to do it to our WebDMZ. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And it basically is saying here you should improve your load balancer security because you're not using SSL. That's great, but I don't actually have any SSL certificates that I can load to this load balancer at this time. So I'm just going to go ahead and ignore that and go on to next. So next we've got configure our health checks, and this is really important. So basically our load balancer is going to query an individual file or an individual pathway, and depending on the results of those queries, it's going to either bring the load balancer in service or out of service. So we're going to do this on HTTP, and we're going to do this on port 80, and the path is going to be what that new file that we created earlier, which was called healthcheck.html. Healthcheck.html. Down here we've got our response timeout. So this is basically the time to wait when receiving a response from the health check. So the minimum is 2 seconds and it can wait up to 60 seconds. I'm going to leave that for 5 seconds now. The next one is our health check interval. And essentially this is the amount of time between each health check. So at the moment it's 30 seconds, and we're going to change this, but I just want to show you how this works. So, okay, so the first one is our unhealthy threshold, and it's set as a default value of 2. Now, basically what this means is the load balancer is going to check in on port 80 to this file, and it's going to try and resolve that file. Now, it's going to do this twice, and if it can't resolve it twice, then that load balancer is going to come out of service. The other thing it's going to do is the healthy threshold. So essentially, again, it's going to check this file and it's going to check it 10 times, and once it's checked it 10 times and it's got 10 successful results, it's going to say the load balancer is in service. Now, what you have to bear in mind in terms of an architectural point of view is that right now the health check interval is 30 seconds. So it would take 2 times 30 seconds for your Elastic Load Balancer to register this EC2 instance as offline. So it's going to do 2 health checks every 30 seconds, and after 2 attempts it's going to say that it's offline. Now, you might want to lower that. You might not want to have a dead web server sitting around for a minute before the Elastic Load Balancer takes it out of service. It's entirely up to you and how you design your applications. For the purposes of this course, I'm actually just going to change it for 10 seconds, just so you can see how this works a lot faster. And I'm going to leave the unhealthy threshold as 2, but I'm going to bring the healthy threshold up to, let's say, 3. So we would know within between 20 seconds as to whether or not this is down, and within 30 seconds of this becoming healthy, it would then go live again. So I'm going to change those values to 5, 10, 2, and 3. Next, we're going to go in and add our EC2 instance. So we go ahead and click on here, add EC2 instances. We can see it's within this VPC, which is my default VPC, and we're going to add in my web server instance. You can see down here by default we enable cross-zone load balancing. So cross-zone load balancing simply distributes traffic evenly across your backend instances in all availability zones. So it doesn't matter what availability zone your EC2 instance is in, cross-zone load balancing will distribute all traffic evenly across all availability zones. The other one is connection draining, and this is basically the number of seconds to allow existing traffic to continue to flow. So I'm going to leave those both checked, and I'm going to go ahead to next and add my tags. So here again, this is key value pair. If you work in an organization where you need to track your costs, I'm just going to put in here, say, staff ID. I'm going to make up a random number, and that would be my ID number. So this load balancer is assigned to this staff member, and we might also say it's developer, and we'll say yes, it's part of the developer group. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and hit review and create. So this is reviewing all the steps, and we're going to go ahead and hit create. Now, this can take a little bit of time, but we'll go ahead and hit close. So right now you're going to see that this load balancer currently is out of service. So if you click down here under the under the instances section, you can see the instances that are assigned to this load balancer, and it's saying that this instance is out of service. We can actually make this a bit bigger as well, so you can bring it all the way up to the top by clicking these icons over here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to wait, and essentially we're going to wait for hopefully 30 seconds, and then this instance will come in service. And you can click the little refresh icon up here, and there we go, it's now in service. Now, if it doesn't come back on for you, there's a couple of things you can do to troubleshoot. And the first thing I always do is I always check the health check, and I make sure I can resolve this URL. So basically use your public IP address /healthcheck.html. So up here, we can see that that resolves fine. It says, hello Cloud Gurus, this instance is healthy. And that basically, if you can't resolve that, it means that something is going on with your security groups. You probably aren't allowing in port 80, for example, or it could be that Apache hasn't been started. So you can also go in here and just check the service, the status of Apache by typing service HTTPD status. Often this will happen if you accidentally reboot the EC2 instance and you haven't configured Apache to automatically start up on reboot, which is what we showed you in one of the earlier labs. So there's a number of reasons that could cause this. Another thing, common thing that can cause this is if students who are doing the labs from the security group section didn't restore that outbound rules on the WebDMZ to all traffic, all ports, etc. So that's could be another reason why it doesn't work. But hopefully you haven't had any issues and you're able to resolve it. And you can see here, if we go back to our load balancers, it is now in service and it's healthy. Now, the last thing I want to point out to you is just if we go to the description, it gives us the DNS name. And the DNS name, and you can see here it says A record. And this is the DNS name that you're going to use to resolve the load balancer. So you can highlight the DNS name here, put it into your clipboard, go across here, and just type in, just the DNS name itself and hit enter. And you'll see here it says hello Cloud Gurus. So it's resolved the index.html using this load balancer DNS name. So it's really important going into the exam to know that your Elastic Load Balancer is never given a static IP address. You're never just given a public IP address for your Elastic Load Balancer. You're given public IP addresses for your EC2 instances, but when you're resolving multiple EC2 instances behind an Elastic Load Balancer, you're always given this DNS address. You're never given a static IP address. So if you do see a question that comes up in the exam and one of the answers is you should resolve the IP address of the load balancer, straight away you know that's an incorrect answer. Okay, so what have we learned in this lab? Well, we've learned that load balancers can be in service or out of service, and the result of whether or not it's in service or out of service depends on your health checks. Now remember, you've got healthy thresholds and unhealthy thresholds, and then you've got a polling duration, and we went through that in the lab. And then the final thing to remember is that Elastic Load Balancers have their own DNS names. You're never given an IP address for an Elastic Load Balancer. Okay, that's it, Cloud Gurus. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.